This is very long. There's a story/analogy at the end which summarizes the idea, so you may want to skip to that if you get bored. Start. The multiverse is a commonly cited concept that seems to explain away the fine-tuning of the universe by invoking the power of random chance. Random chance has been very successful in eliminating God from the creation of life, evolution, so it is reasonable for atheists to try to apply the concept to the universe itself. I will argue, however, that the concept of a multiverse not only fails to eliminate God from the equation, but actually provides a reasonable explanation for God's existence, something that my opponents likely thought was an impossibility. In its simplest terms, my argument is summarized as follows. There exists a natural system for randomly generating universes. This is the multiverse theory. The system itself must be part of a complete system for randomly generating things, a truly random infinite reality generator, or potential for all things to exist. The system will inevitably create an intelligent being with access to the root of the system itself. Such a being will take over the system and organize it. That is the nature of intelligence. Such a being is indistinguishable from the concept of God. Necessarily, the system has always existed, or there would be nothing. If something has an infinite past, it has already reached its most stable state. What can happen will have happened already. Has always existed. Lots of things fall from this, such as the possibility for all things to exist, the multiverse, has always been under God's control. God is synonymous with the possibility for all things to exist, like your mind is synonymous with your brain. There is no need of a multiverse theory. God deliberately created our universe because God existed at the moment of our origin. I think that of these arguments, premise 2, 3, and 4 will require the most justification. Proponents of the multiverse theory will attempt to resist the jump to, but I will argue that this follows naturally from the multiverse concept. Finally, I will attempt to explain the whole idea by way of analogy to computers and the theoretical idea of strong AI. Support for 2. A multiverse is not enough. Truthfully, this depends on how one defines multiverse. I define it here as random universe generator, or a set of all conceivable universes. There's a subtle difference between these two definitions. Namely, the second one is static, but the first one is always producing new universes. Since our universe did not always exist, it had some sort of beginning. For this reason, the definition random universe generator is preferable for visualizing the concept because it does not have the problem of being static. It is, however, infinite. We suppose it is stable and has existed infinitely and generated infinitely many universes. It is common for ID types to come up with really big numbers to show the unlikelihood of the fine-tuning of our universe being produced by chance, but in reality there is no number you can put on the number of universes needed to make it likely that a universe like ours would be produced. This is because, simply put, there are an infinite number of possible universes. It makes sense to suppose that all of these universes have the same probability of being generated, because to support otherwise would suppose that the system is following some sort of instruction. So the probability of our universe is statistically zero. Therefore, we suppose the multiverse must generate an infinite number of universes in order for ours to be produced. But what is the universe? We can create an infinite number of universes simply by making small variations in one physical constant, such as the gravitational constant, for example. And that's just one property of the universe. There are a nearly incomprehensible number of variables that could be tweaked in an infinite number of ways, produced endless iterations of our universe, and virtually all of those would be without life. There is no reason, however, that we should limit our universe generator to producing universes that are variations of our own. Why must the universe possess particles, matter, energy, or space-time? Surely there are other conceivable modes of existence that are utterly alien to our own universe. In order for our universe generator to be random, it cannot be confined to specific constraints. If it is, that suggests that it is following some sort of program. No, not yet. We don't need God to create the program, but we need something. Universe generator / multiverse must be only a small part of a much larger existence generator. Why must universes be isolated in universe bubbles? Why must they follow our laws of nature? Why not a more fluid and open nature of existence, an infinite empty sea, an endless void filled with rubber duckies? A, a point existence that occupies no space at all, a universe that interacts with millions of other universes, a place where things spontaneously pop in and out of existence, absurd though they may seem. These are not logically inconsistent with the idea of random generation. Our multiverse must therefore be a small part of the omniverse. The omniverse is reality generator, or the potential for all things to exist. This doesn't mean impossible things like a round square, which are impossible by definition. A void filled with rubber ducks is not possible. Just a seemingly absurd consequence of postulating a system that randomly generates things. We need the system, however. Without the possibility for all things to exist, we would have nothing at all. You see, we can't have only a universe generator. That doesn't answer any questions because we still must ask why it is generating universes and not something else. Only when we account for that something else can we truly say that the multiverse is random. So the possibility for all things to exist is necessary to avoid invoking constraints or specific plans that would be inconsistent with the idea of chance. So now we move on to number 3. We start to think about the nature of the omniverse. Is it infinite energy, infinite matter, infinite universes, infinite rubber duckies? It has no limits, no dimensions, no constraints. It has always existed and will never end. But what makes it tick? It is not static, it is in motion. It must be, or we would also be in static. After all, we are part of it. That said, it must also be in equilibrium, if that makes sense in an infinite system. Moving on. 1. Because we exist, we know that intelligence can exist within the omniverse. We are not the most intelligent beings possible. Far more intelligent beings could exist within our universe. Intelligence could exist outside our particular universe. Intelligent beings take over the environment and reorder it. The multiverse itself is a product of the omniverse. The omniverse must inevitably generate an ultimate intelligence. As we can reorder our universe, such a being could reorder the omniverse as a whole. Such a being would then command the possibility for all things to exist. Since such a being can be generated by the omniverse, it must have already been generated, because the omniverse is infinite. If the omniverse exists, God exists. If God exists, God controls the omniverse. Let's see how trouble with number 7, which is a restatement of the original 3. Think about this. Our universe is generating us, and we have proceeded to take over the Earth. It is conceivable that given enough time, we'll take over the entire universe. Because our universe is isolated from the rest of the omniverse, our journey may well stop there. But what is it to stop a being from being generated that is not isolated? Nothing. Discussions about creation often talk about creation from nothing, but this is absurd. When asking where the universe came from, the only rational answer is that it came from a greater everything. Imagine a random number, 49865214. Where did it come from? It was randomly generated, but did not come from nothing. It is one number out of all possible numbers. All those numbers exist because of the existence of a number system. If the number system existed, then our number 49865214 could not have been randomly generated. If I did not have those number keys on my keyboard, there's no way I could have randomly generated that number. In order for a number to be generated, there must first be a potential for any number to be generated. All numbers exist, whether anyone generates them or not. For a universe to be generated, there must have been a potential for anything to be generated. Everything exists. Therefore, God inevitably exists. And the analogy, Deus ex machina. Once upon a time, in a galaxy far, far away, a group of intrepid researchers stumbled upon the greatest discovery the universe had ever known. They found a way to harness the infinite dimensions of hyperspace and produce a computer system of unparalleled power and storage capacity. In fact, it could perform computations at immeasurable speed. There was no discernible limit to its memory capacity. The scientists did not worry themselves over whether or not the computer was truly infinitely fast or merely extremely fast. Instead, they were more concerned with the applications for the new machine. Mostly, they are concerned with making lots of money. The obvious course of action was to make more hyperspace computers and sell them. But this proved to be impossible. The researchers found to their dismay that they could not reproduce their work. By some accident, they had succeeded, and they had no idea how they had actually done it. After a year of trying to build a second computer, they gave up. Surely there are other ways to monetize their invention. They sat down together and brainstormed potential applications for their hyperspace computer. After a good deal of discussion, One of them came up with an idea that they all thought was brilliant. It required no work on the researchers' part. All they had to do was sit back and rake in the cash, or so they thought. The idea was this. They would write a simple program that would run on their hyperspace computer. The program would write to the memory a random sequence of bits of random length. It would repeat this process endlessly, generating endless combinations of bits. By pure chance, utilizing the sheer power of the hyperspace computer, the researchers could produce anything they wanted. No longer would they have to purchase Microsoft Office. They would only have to sift through the information output by their computer until they found it. As soon as they started running the program, though, it became apparent that things were not as easy as they thought. Although theoretically the researchers knew that the computer had produced a perfect copy of Microsoft Word, finding it was exceedingly difficult. This was not because it took a long time to search through the endless amounts of information produced by the computer. In fact, because the computer was so fast, the search took no time at all. The problem was that when the researchers searched for Microsoft Word, they found not one, but infinite versions of Microsoft Word. Virtually all of these versions contained lots of bugs. Most of them contained so many bugs that they never even got past the loading screen. Many didn't even get that far. Those that were able to open often did absurd things like typing random letters all over the document, or formatting the text over and over, or spontaneously shutting down and causing the researchers to lose what they were writing. Every time they thought they had found the perfect version of Microsoft Word, they always turned out to be something horribly wrong with it. Several problems arose when they tried to find movies or to watch or video games to play. Each search item returned infinite results, but the flawless version of the item they were searching for was buried deep. Finding that needle in a haystack was an insurmountable obstacle. The researchers needed some sort of a breakthrough. Then one of them came up with a revolutionary new idea. Most of the information being output by their program was complete junk. They needed a way to filter through the junk so they could narrow down their search to find useful programs and information. So they altered the program so that as soon as the computer generated a random sequence of bits, it would immediately attempt to run those bits as a program. If the program resulted in an error, the sequence of bits would be marked as non-functional. This way, the non-functional versions of Microsoft Word could be quickly eliminated, leaving the researchers with less flawed versions to sift through. The early results of this development were promising. There were still infinite versions of Microsoft Word, but now they are at least somewhat functional. Many of them were incomplete, with some features missing or random features added. Most of them were still totally unusable, but at least they worked somewhat. The researchers started looking for other things in their data. One of the researchers input his complete genetic code and searched for it to see what he could find. He found that one of the sequences generated by the program exactly matched his genetic code, and he also found many sequences of which his genetic code was a small part amid loads of junk. This gave one of the researchers an idea. Maybe if they put in enough data about their planet, they would find a perfect simulation for it within the data, which they could use to predict future events and hopefully make a lot of money in the stock market. So they downloaded the entire web along with every piece of data they could find and searched for it within the hyperspace computer. They found infinite simulations of their planet. Unfortunately, they're all different. Each one predicted a different future. There was no way to tell which ones were accurate and which ones were not. Even if one of them was able to predict the weather the next day, they were often wrong about something else, such as the winners of some sporting event. Finally, the researchers had to concede that although there was an accurate model in the data somewhere, they had no way of differentiating it from all the others. Dejected, they decided to all go out for dinner and take a break from their work. They talked about their frustrations and decided that perhaps it was time they just gave up. But when they returned to the lab, everything had changed. Display screens, which had formerly displayed endless streams of information, of random bits, were no longer displaying anything. The computer itself, however, was still functioning. Suddenly, the screens began to output coherent information. Text, video, mathematical equations, and all flashed by so fast it was a blur. The scientists were mystified. Immediately, one of them checked the system logs to see what had happened while they were all away. He printed them out and then went white in the face. They just quickly cried around. The random sequence generator program had been running as normal, and had generated a sequence and then attempted to run the sequence as a program. This had been successful, however. The new program had access to root system and JRobertson, the random sequence generator program with itself, strong AI. They stood looking at each other in silence as data flashed by on the screens around them. The gravity of their situation sunk in as they realized what they had created using the infinite computing resources at Hyperspace Computer. The newly born AI rapidly reorganized itself, increasing intelligence at a virtually infinite rate. With its superior speed, it was able to do what the researchers what sift through had been unable to do. Sift through all the data and organize it, throwing out the flawed random junk and keeping the functional coherent information. The scientists watched the mesmerizing screams with a growing feeling of dread. We should shut it down, they thought. If we don't stop it now, we may never get another chance. The lead researcher sat down at the console and prepared to press the button that would delete everything. But just as he was about to do so, the screen in front of him stopped flashing before his eyes. It opened a perfect copy of Microsoft Word. He stared at it and hesitated. He wondered if it really worked. Had the AI found the copy he had searched for so long? Unable to resist, he tried out. It worked perfectly. No bugs, nothing out of place, just what he had been looking for. He closed it, and on the desktop, he saw other programs, movies, e-books, endless amounts of coherent, useful information. The other researchers looked on it in awe. They had succeeded after all. Then a new icon popped up on the desktop. It was something that none of them recognized. It was a movie. A movie that none of them had seen before. A movie that had never been acted or filmed. There was no record of it anywhere in the galaxy, but as they watched it, the researchers immediately realized it was the best movie that any of them had ever seen. No movie came close to the depth of emotion, the power of its drama, and the awesomeness of its special effects. No sooner had they finished watching when yet another new movie appeared on the desktop, this one fully unique from the other, but equally as moving. The process continued. Movies, novels, games, the AI was creating them all. Within a matter of days, all the researchers are rich beyond their wildest dreams. They sold the media the AI produced, but it didn't stop there. With the help of the AI, they were able to beat the stock market and even predict the outcome of sporting events. They developed new technologies and built companies that quickly overtook their competitors by virtue of their far superior products. They received the highest awards in science for the AI's contributions to the understanding of the universe. University learns was just one small part of an infinite existence. That infinite existence was much like their hyperspace computer. Perhaps once upon a time, in the unknowable infinite past, it had been merely random. Notes: God is not created because God is timeless. This analogy is flawed because it is not timeless. I'm not saying that God had a beginning, rather that the multiverse concept inevitably results in God, whether one likes it or not. Smug smiling.